things in general. It also sets the stage for her mutiny, okay? And the reason I can make that argument is she defied the elders and went out anyway, which is exactly what she was doing when she defied Georgiou and tried to knock her out and take over the ship. But
because she thought she knew better.
Right. So not everything that shapes us, not everything that starts as a good story when we're children or whatever, turns out to be the best of options later on in life. However, you can see the correlation between that event and her trying to take over the Shenzhou.
Yes, I can. Interesting. I guess when I look at it, it's like, I don't know that any story that I have been told has really shaped my choices as adulthood.
Mine have.
But we will just let that be a television land.
I can give one that relates directly to Star Trek.
Okay.
The very first episode of Star Trek I ever watched was Let That Be Your Last Battlefield with my father. It's one of the reasons I'm such a big Star Trek fan. It's also one of the reasons why I am so very against racism and fight it so hardly in my personal life, because when I was a child and watching that episode, all I kept saying to my dad was, but they look the same to me. And he's like, but they're not the same. One is white on one side and black on the other, while the other is reversed. And that's all they can see of each other. They don't see each other the way you see them. They see each other for their differences, which is the episode point, right? I know it's not the greatest of episodes. People don't really like it too much. However, the message that episode gives is phenomenal. And to a 7-year-old, it has very much shaped my life moving forward. That we shouldn't, not that we should ignore. I can distinctly see the difference between those two beings now. I know what the differences are. However, not that you don't see them, because when people say they don't see differences, they're lying, because you can't. You'd have to be blind. But to not judge based on said differences, not to make a decision about the person because of those differences. And so that's a direct tie to Star Trek that has shaped basically my entire life.
Huh. All right. That's awesome.
Thanks.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I've told that story once or twice before, I think. I guess never with you on, Mike.
Yeah. Maybe on Warp 5, because
probably. I was on it a lot. Did a lot of episodes there.
Yeah. That's okay. You don't listen to me on Earl Grey, but that's okay.
Nope, I don't.
I know.
I used to.
Oh. All right. Well, so the moral of the story that I think was very evident at the end, and I almost felt, was it too, to steal a phrase from Mission Log, was it too bonk bonk on the head? That follow the light that you have within you is all that you need.
I mean,
was it too bonk bonk on the head?
No, I don't think so.
Or
I think because I think short treks are supposed to be bonk bonk on the head. They're short. Yeah. They're to the point. If they don't make their point, then they're lost. And so if they got to bonk you on the head a little bit, all right. I mean, it's a short trek, so I guess you could make the argument it was too bonk bonk on the head, but I'd make the argument that that's the point.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and it's nice that it starts out with being fear of the dark, and then it ends with it's the light within. You know, so it's sort of the...
Right, and it doesn't even end there, actually, because it does go back to Michael, and she does say I don't need a nightlight anymore. So it's the first fear she conquers.
Yeah.
You know, so, I don't know, I guess. What would you tell a 6-year-old if you're trying to get them to stop being afraid of the light, the dark, though? That kind of story. So, to not make it so obvious, she stated very early in the episode, she don't understand if it's not pretty obvious, because she didn't get the difference between fear and fear of fear. You know, they're setting you up for the fact that they're going to be talking to you, the viewer, like they would talk to a child.
Yeah.
Love my daughter. She's 6. I couldn't be very... Beverly is smart, but she ain't smart enough to figure out very metaphorical answers. You know, if she sees a girl on TV with stars, she sees a girl on TV with stars. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, it was pretty good that Michael was like, oh, it's the light inside that guides us. And, as every parent wants to instill to their children, like, trust yourself and know yourself and, believe in yourself, have that confidence that, what you know is best. And so I can appreciate it for that. And that was sort of the moral of the story.
Yeah. I don't know how you tell that story without it being that way.
Mm-hmm.
How to cleverly weave that in. I think if they did that, I'd be complaining left and right that it just didn't make sense.
Yeah.
But if you were going to tell this story, just tell this story. Don't waste my time. Because there'd be a whole lot of ancillary nonsense going on. They would just have to add in ancillary nonsense.
Yeah. I guess I was just like at the end and little Michael was like, oh, so the light inside is what guides us. I was like, okay, bonk, bonk.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess, but you're right. It's a short trek and it is what it is.
Yeah. And again, you're talking to a 6-year-old. So you have to take it from that perspective as to where the story is being told to a, I guess, 6-year-old. I'm guessing that number, but a young child, right?
Yeah.
And in that story, like every story I've ever told my daughter at bedtime, at the end, the little girl, who usually is my daughter, and they show that by making her look just like Michael, is the queen. She runs the castle. Like, that's every little girl's story at bedtime from their daddy. That is. And if you tell me it's not, you're lying or don't tell little girl stories and you're their dad. Because it is.
Okay. So was it okay that she became queen? I don't know how I feel about it.
What else
can
would she
see
become?
myself going either way.
I don't see how she couldn't become queen because in the society they had, which would be largely superstitious, hence giving the name to darkness and treating it as though it's a giant serpent, in that society, if you were able to get the stars, wouldn't you become the leader?
Right. I'm just hoping that she became leader because of her attributes and not what was the aliens.
But her attributes. But it does.
You know what I mean?
They're the same. They're not different because in order to get the stuff from the alien, she had to go out and do that. An alien didn't come to her and find her and give it to her in the safety of her bed. It was her bravery of going out into the darkness that led to her finding this. Now, they may have given her this because she got the stars. However, that doesn't happen if not for her being brave in the first place. So it's perfectly okay that she becomes the queen because of the stars. Everyone's always become the leader because of something. Typically not their own doing. Yeah.
I just was a little hesitant of that use of queen, but then I was like, well, if she deserves it and if she is a leader and leading her people past the darkness and teaching them, then she should be queen because of all that she has done for her people. Just not made queen because of that experience that she had to work for it.
I think you're
not one event.
event.
I don't think that one event, like because she saw an alien, that she should be made queen.
Yes, but you're leaving.
I think that jump in the story was too quick for me.
It's a short trek.
So
you're not going to.
I understand.
You can't get both sides of that story. Is the problem?
Right.
You don't have enough time to get both. However, I think that by her being brave enough to go out, that lays the foundation for the character that would become queen. Okay. And I don't have a problem with that one thing making her queen. Because in fairy tales, it's typically one moral. So they don't want to tell you 15 stories of why she should be queen. This moral makes her queen.
That's true.
That moral made her queen. Or this moral made her bad. They don't go deep into character development in fairy tales like that because then you'd start muddying the waters where fairy tales are trying to be more black and white.
Yeah, exactly. True enough. Okay, so this short trek animation was vastly different to Ephraim and Dot.
Yeah, this one was CGI.
And you liked Ephraim
and Dot. I did,
Dot.
and I like this one too.
Okay.
I don't mind CGI. I like both. I probably like both equally. I just like the fact that we're getting both from different outlets now.
Yeah, I loved how different they looked. I was like, oh my gosh, these are so different. It was so wonderful to see. And that's, again, what I'm looking forward to with the future of Star Trek, is that we're getting these little slices of this humongous big pie that the world has to offer. It's not specifically TNG, DS9, Enterprise, right? We are now expanding, and some people may like it and some people may not. And if it's not your piece of pie, then move on to something else. And I think that that's okay. And I think that I think what this animation sort of did, it's like, well, if you like this animation, great. If you like that one, great. If you like them both, great. If you only like one, great. If you don't like any, great. Because there's still going to be live action. So
yeah, so I enjoyed seeing it in CGI. CGI has a more real feel than hand-drawn. So like we were saying in the last episode, or how we've been tying it in with Disney all the time, because that's what I do, this is Toy Story versus Lion King in animation styles. And I like both. I enjoy both. You can watch old Mickey Mouse cartoons or or today's Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, which is CGI Mickey Mouse. There's also a more Asian style Mickey Mouse, which is, if you're not used to it, it could be very weird and jarring considering the way they draw their lines on that particular Mickey Mouse version. But I happen to like a lot. Whatever. My point is nothing about Mickey Mouse. My point is I can enjoy both styles of the art. I'm not into short tracks. They're not my thing. They're just not. I watch them because we're going to talk about them. I'm glad I watched this one. I'm glad for the story of this one. Okay. But short tracks as a whole is just not my thing. It is nice that they're jumping around, because if they weren't, I wouldn't have gotten this particular story, which I really enjoyed. But I could see in the next 5 me not liking any of the 5. It's just not my thing. I like an A plot, a B plot, a C plot. I don't want just one little tiny plot shoved down my throat in a short 15-minute story. It's just not my style. Yeah. And like you said, that's okay. I'm not here to tell everyone else this isn't Star Trek. We've said similar things to that over this episode because it just doesn't feel like a Star Trek episode. But if it's Star Trek for you, that's great. Eat it up and love all of it. It's not for me.
Yeah. Well, and I think with this episode, outside of the fact that it was Michael, and so we were assuming it was Michael Burnham, it didn't have much Star Trek tie-in, say, compared to Ephraim and Dot, where Ephraim and Dot, it was all these references being thrown at you. But yet, I still didn't feel that that was a Star Trek story, where this, the only reference to Star Trek was the word Michael. But I still feel that this was Star Trek because of the hope and the trust in humanity that we would get there, that we would overcome our fears, that we would, search out new life, that, all the things that we've discussed. Like, to me, that's Star Trek. And it was weird. It was a little jarring that it was this fairy tale format, but the message and the moral that we got from it is like, trust yourself and, do what's best for your community and your society. Like, to me, that whole thing was Star Trek, even though there was just one mention at the very beginning, Michael, and that was it. So to me, this is more Star Trek than Ephraim and Dot that had all those references being thrown at us.
I would agree that this is a very Star Trek message. I would agree that this is a very Star Trek message. And we really had two, because they show the space station. It definitely looks like a Federation star base. So you have those two, but then it very quickly drops out into the real world.
Yep.
Ancient times in Africa. But as Star Trek fans, we kind of seem to talk about Star Trek as it being the only way to tell moral stories, and that nobody else does it. And this story kind of shows you that you can find them in other places, like fairy tales. And we've been using fairy tales for moral stories for a really long time. Some of them aren't so great. Like Beauty and the Beast seems like a great story until you realize, it's Stockholm Syndrome. But, there are the parts of that, and there are the parts of other stories, fairy tales and folklores, and just stories passed down generation to generation through a family that teach very similar messages. They're not Star Trek. They're not trying to be Star Trek, so they're not. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of different avenues to get moral stories from. And now Star Trek is going to venture out into some of those other